давай, на самом деле, проект основания
Татьяна Федорова. Татьяна Федорова.
Я думаю, что долго не займет, если только нет
Прилетает, давай соберемся. Да? Давай соберемся и, в принципе,
с тобой собраться. Не было лака.
давай.
Первый даунлоуд, его надо раньше сделать.
Hey guys, please take your seats.
Давай.
Ну да, вот это что все. А нет, я не сяду, я здесь буду таскаться.
It's cutting off a little bit at the top, so I was just checking. Stretch like this.
Take your glasses and move forward. Well, before we start our event today, let me thank Wilmer Hale for hosting us continuously in this nice location and nice room. And also, let me thank Epiphan Systems for providing today live stream, right, or record of June. You might think it's way there, but the tickets are selling fast, and right now we have very cheap tickets. So if you are interested to attend, go and buy your tickets now. Next Tuesday, October 28th, we have an unusual event, Alexei Navalny.
He's not Alexei.
Oh,
Leonid.
oh, sorry, Leonid, yeah. Why did I put Alexei?
It's okay.
And this is just a list of successful Russian-speaking companies. And let me introduce you. So they say that somebody is always watching us. And guess what? This is Alexei. So RetailNext is the market leader's analytics might be applied to retail stores. And right now, RetailNext provides in-store analytics for in 40 countries. And when I say sensors, it means Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi tracking, credit card solutions, Beam, Brookstone, Montblanc, and many other companies. RetailNext raised 4 rounds of funding in the total of $60 million, right? And we'll talk about it right now. And so the money was raised from both top venture capital funds like August Capital and corporate giants like Nokia, Growth Ventures, and Amex. He worked for many years at Cisco and then came up with the idea of RetailNext, started the company, and recently was named. I invite you to this table, and let's proceed with our discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
By the way, let me tell you that this is an open discussion. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Let us just keep track of the questions and for the warm-up. So how did you come up with the idea? How did you get together the founding team, and how hard was it to raise your first round?
So, well, we came up as you said, I was working at Cisco, and before leaving, for about 2 years before leaving, I did an internal startup with a few of my colleagues where we were building a At Cisco, actually ended up deploying all the Harris properties, Venetian, Hard Rock, lots of big casinos. And then like most internal startups and big companies, it stopped being a startup in a pretty abrupt way. And actually almost, 7+ years later, all 6 of them are still there. After that, we went out of our way not to hire any more people from Cisco. We wanted some diversity in the company, so nothing bad, but I think it was actually pretty important for us to get different people from different backgrounds, especially since we set out to be a retail company. We knew nothing about retail, so one of the, I think, pretty important things we did early on is hire a lot of retailers into the company as well, so that was, I think, a pretty important decision. In terms of raising our first money, in 2007, 2008, raising money in the Valley from venture capitalists to do analytics for physical retail stores, I think was pretty much impossible. I think no venture, capitalized by e-commerce. Plus, venture guys are somewhat in, looking for patterns of successful exits, and nobody could find a successful exit of a retail technology company focused on brick and mortar. So we've had a couple meetings, but we didn't really go far down.
Did you went right away to VCs, or did you start with the angels?
So we met with a couple of VCs and realized pretty quickly that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So we were pretty fortunate. We were actually able to raise about $6 million in angel money, private money, before we did any venture rounds. So it was a tough time. We had people that invested. We got $2 million right away, and people that invested were people that knew the team. I don't think they knew anything about what we were doing, but they did know the team well, and some of them, one of the guys sold his company to Cisco, got to know us well, and they purely invested in the team. And the same people gave us another $4 million, all fairly painlessly, and that got us going. Like I said, we had quite a bit of traction. It still wasn't easy done, but we had quite a bit of traction, so we had a decent amount of interest.
So who was the funded person?
So August Capital was our first venture investor, and it was. I found out they've actually been a fantastic partner, so I would really highly recommend them to anybody. They've been now an investor for quite a while. They're the biggest shareholder in the company, and I think their approach was quite different. Even in 2011, even though we had great customers, we had customers, large retailers, and people like Pepsi, Procter & Gamble were customers, and we had decent revenue growth and great references. A lot of venture capitalists kind of couldn't figure out what kind of company we were and what mold.
Which box to put you in?
Yeah. They really, at that stage of the company where we were revenue, but fairly early revenue and stuff, they were very focused on customer diligence. So I would say at that stage, last couple of rounds were very different, but that stage it was very focused on, they talked to people in corporate, and I would say kind of the ROI stories and the passion about customers and why the product was important was probably the biggest thing that helped at that point. That and the team, I think. They spent a lot of time kind of getting to know the team. And again, having kind of a unique combination of pretty good technical
Did they take
people.
you to dinners or for a drive to go?
6 partners, so it's and doing the due diligence, I met every partner at least twice, one-on-one, which I think most other venture firms, I think diligence wasn't like that. They spent a lot of time in our offices also, and a whole bunch of sessions that were fairly free-flowing sessions. Was the main partner that led the deal, not without any presentation, anything like that, just kind of brainstorming how we're going to build a business and things like that. So that was, at least in my experience, that was pretty unusual. So, but yeah, and then we ended up, we said that was not an easy process, that first venture round. We talked to probably 15, 20 VCs, and we had maybe 3 people in late stage diligence.
The early stage funding, anyone?
Did you ever consider convertible debt? Was it even a question?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I say we got $2 million right away means that, like 2 months later. So we opened a convertible bridge right away. I put in some money, a few of our co-founders, a couple of my colleagues at Cisco, so we maybe had $400,000, $500,000 there right away. And we said we'll close it when we get to $2 million, we'll convert it into equity. And that happened pretty quickly. Actually, some of the companies he funded had sold to Cisco, and he pretty much said, when we had maybe $500,000, he said, well, tell me how much you need, and let me put in the rest, and then we'll close the round. And we tried. I didn't know the guy that well, so we tried to get a bunch of more people. So we got about $1 million from other people, $1 million from him, and we converted at that time. But yeah.
Did you agree on valuation at the time of investing, or you postponed it, like you kept it? How would you do it?
No, the point of opening a convertible debt and bridge loan was to not worry about valuation. So we kind of agreed on the valuation at the time we closed the $2 million investment. And it was not, I mean, at that stage, it definitely wasn't a very scientific process. It
Yeah,
was
how did you come up with evaluation?
Well, I mean,
You may not name the numbers,
yeah,
right?
no, I mean, it was fairly straightforward. We looked at it in terms of percentage, and based on that, we came up with a number. I mean, at that time, we literally had a PowerPoint presentation and a few people, and that's it. So it was not, and like I said, these are individual investors. I mean, and then every time the valuation went up a little bit, but it was about a week process of kind of figuring out what it should be.
So 6 million for a startup is pretty unusual, right? But 6 people is also pretty unusual. So
Yeah.
how did you divide your responsibilities?
Yeah, well, it wasn't, I mean, it was 6 people within, I would say, 2 months or so, of 2.5 months, but all 6 of us, that was the first 6 people. So there was, I mean, myself, I was joined, and I think 2 weeks later, one of my co-founders, who is still the CTO and kind of runs the engineering team at the company right now, joined, and then Marley, who's been worked with me for, I don't know, almost 8 years or so before that, through different products. She was doing everything from testing, kind of technical marketing, pilot setup, those type of things. And it was, in the beginning, it was pretty, for a while, I was the only non-technical guy for probably a good bit over time. But yeah, the rest of the people are all engineers. We try to pick the best engineers we like from our whole team.
So let's talk about the business and
Yeah,
the right technical people in the audience. So maybe you will talk a little bit more about that.
if we did, maybe it would have been easier to raise funding, but
We didn't do that. You still did pretty well.
Yeah, no, we did okay, but it was, I mean, but we were very vertically focused data company, and our view about kind of, I mean, big data is obviously a big buzzword, but I think the way you make it truly useful is by combining the latest and greatest technology with a really deep understanding of the questions you're trying to answer. So we made a decision very early on that we are going to be only do retail. Initially, we actually, very beginning, we thought we were going to do retail first, then banking, then hospitality. We got away from that. But the idea is to understand everything possible about physical retail stores. So we build a system now that can automatically, without any human intervention, tell you how many people walk through the front doors of your store, how many, a lot about those people, male, female, age, where they're from, where they go inside the store, where they spend time, where product interact. Now a little bit of Bluetooth beacons. We get a lot of existing data we get all the point of sale data, all the transactions, every dollar that's spent, we get all the, retailers have time and attendance systems, so when sales associates clock in, clock out, we get that data, we get weather data, we shopped afterwards, and we do have intellectual property around video analytics and Wi-Fi triangulation. We have a pattern about bringing those together, but we don't consider any of that intellectual property core to our company. We consider that something that we had to do. The core intellectual property to us is what we do with the data, how we make sense of that data, and how we make it actionable. And I think, something else, and then somebody says, hey, we can also sell it to retailers, and they really have no idea what problems they're going to solve. So it's more of a technology looking for a solution. And then retail IT departments are generally pretty risk averse for fairly good reasons, because there's a lot at stake. It's very easy to screw things up, and there's lots of dollars being spent at retail stores. So for us, I think one of the important things is, and it's been actually hard for us to communicate it early on, that we're not a video analytics company, we're not visible. And we are, we never heard of beacons a couple of years ago. Now beacons is part of the solution, other things like that. So, but yeah.
Anyone?
I don't know, probably it will be interesting for at least a portion of this audience. Can you tell me a little bit about the technology stack that you're running big data, roughly?
Yeah, so I mean, the technology stack is not necessarily that exciting, and we are, so in a sense that systems, there was about, it was about 13 people and a little over $1 million and about $1.5 million in kind of recurring revenue at the time. And the reason I'm saying that, with regards to this question, is because they had a system. We had an appliance that we put in the store. That appliance, it was a Linux appliance. I mean, the database was initially MySQL, and we changed it to Postgres, mostly because it was better and cheaper, and after the Oracle acquisition. And that appliance in the store, that's what did video analytics. It did a whole bunch of other functions as well. And then we had a corporate instance of a RetailNext that would run either in the cloud, when in the cloud, meaning we'll use Amazon to host it, or it would run in the data center, retail data center behind their firewall. It was pretty important for some of our customers, given we got a lot of their sensitive data, to be able to run it behind their firewall, especially if you do a lot of customization around like Postgres and those type of things. And we had to, like most data company, we had to rewrite our schema 3 times as we understood, but it was very retail specific knowledge. We were trying to figure out how do we correlate these things, how we do those. It's hard, right? So we we could run it in the cloud. We talked about it as a cloud system. We sold our, you know, software on a recurring basis, but it was an instance for every single retailer. So Victoria's Secret had their own instance, Montblanc had their own instance. Now we're building it as a multi-tenant system, and that was, I mean, we didn't really think we could do it at the time we started, but it's very hard for a company that's, you know, growing fast, has a lot of customers, has a ton of features to do, to dedicate a bunch of resources to go and rewrite everything. But we felt it was a necessary thing to do, and then the same was, so we actually just kind of been completing that, and we still have an instance of that can run in a private environment. And the same with the user interface. That's another thing. We built our original UI in Flex, and at that time that was like we couldn't find any engineers because it was too new and nobody like knew how to do it. Now, like a ton of features in our application, and it's hard because we have a ton of features that people are asking for that we know we can sell and generate extra revenue, and we have to go and dedicate a bunch of resources to rewrite everything. But I feel like our goal is that we have to invest in things like that. So I don't know if it directly answers your question, but hopefully that's helpful.
No, it's a great,
Yeah.
great answer.
Yeah.
And you said you're not technical.
Yeah. I'm not.
How difficult was it to convert a retail? I know they're not easy to sell to.
So the question is,
We called some of our advisors and investors and got a few introductions to some retail executives. And the meetings went actually pretty badly. Like it was, we showed them this prototype, we had a prototype of a prototype, so we had one of two answers. First answer was, we already have too much data, our problem is not that we need more data. So that was, which was, I mean, it was a surprise for us at the time, but that actually different systems. Like they would have a traffic system, they would have a workforce management system, they would have a point of sale system, promotional system, none of them integrated together. So actually one of the things we focused on, besides, we still focused a lot on creating new data because we felt it was important, but we also fit kind of average ticket and what promotions they ran on the same report. All that data they already had, but we just combined it together, and they were amazed because they couldn't, like it would take a guy to, like, he has to look at 3 systems to do it. And then we started adding all this additional data. But the second response we got, which to us was, like, was kind of interesting, where people were, like PhD level stuff when we're still in kindergarten, we're still trying to use spreadsheets to figure out our hours, and even some big retailers. And that's where, I mean, that's actually at the time when we had these meetings when we decided to go and bring in a whole bunch of retailers. So we hired like one of the first people we hired after the sales was a woman who ran stores at Tiffany's and Lancome and Polo Ralph Lauren. We hired somebody who used to be head of operations at Saks Fifth Avenue, and we kind of worked with them to make it. The times were tough. Like in 2008, 2009, retailers were without it. Like it will make it like it needs to be essential. But it wasn't easy. Retail, you get a really good apparel retailer that people respect. You get a ton more apparel. It started taking off pretty quick, and then things have slowed us down after that with more internal operational things versus sales.
A customer has got your system, and it lets.
We go to most retailers, especially say specialty retail. We can go to a head of stores and we can tell them, you put this 6 stores, they see it, and then they're all commercial crazy retailers. So maybe they staff and the way was American Apparel was a pretty badly run retailer, and those 25 stores were their worst. The Business Week article about it, where the first store they deployed based on understanding how people kind of flow through the store. We had people that could drive. Sometimes small deals were coming from the floor fixtures. They had 2 fixtures in the floor, but once they brought them both down, it was about 2 to 3%. Retailers, and then you know, device seems like a very obvious thing that you want to make it actionable. Because, I don't know, there's something wrong with it. There's no way. People are busy, they forget about it, and then nobody does anything about the system, and it kind of, you see a store where your conversion dropped. Within seconds, you can see that, hey, you were supposed to have 5. Look at video, see people backed up, second checkout is not open, where you can see part of the floor. And then you see the performance changes, and you see results, you know, kind of go up. And I mean, one of the, kind of like we messed up an account we haven't had in the last, 6+ years, we haven't had a single.
Say I go to Costco, I do shopping. So how far are you in figuring out what my needs are?
Well, and serve them much better. A lot of the technology is there. I can't think of a single retail of analytics when we talk to customers today. And at the bottom layer, the store type of things I was talking about with staffing, layout, other things. Then we have something called shopper-based analytics, which again, a store at a particular time. So if you have 1,000 stores, every store is different. The same store will be different lunchtime, evening, weekends, seasonally. And we can build a profile of how many of them percentage women, males, age buckets, and how many of them new customers never been to a store versus repeat visitors, where are they from, those type of things. And that can inform how you staff, how you market to them. And then there's a third layer where if somebody actively opts in, so you have to actively tell a retailer, it's okay for you to track me as an individual into that. So today, Number one way we're able to get people to identify is through guest Wi-Fi. That's not the most exciting way, but that's the highest probably volume. So if you go into certain, you actually after that, your email goes into there, you become a loyalty customer almost by default. Your email and your information goes to their CRM automatically from our system. And every time you come back to any of the stores, once you do that once in one store, as long as your Wi-Fi is on, as long as you haven't switched your phone, we know when you come in, we know how much time you spend in the store. Depending on the, so if you go to Amazon, while you're in the store, we know you went to Amazon. If you look at the product, we know you looked at what product you looked at, what the price of that product was, and we know whether you saved that product in your basket or not. We don't know if you checked out because that part is encrypted. But everything up to that, you can actually, and all that can be associated with your email ID and your profile and your other things and things. If people put beacons in the store and you download an app, either retailer app or some other app that engages it, then we know that you walked in because of that app, and we know your app, and based on your history and everything else, they can take it, combine it with what you did online, and they can figure out how to make you recommendations, things like that. We are not going to do that part of it. We are an enabling technology. 1,000 companies working on different type of personalization experiences. We're working with a lot of them. We think some of them will do really interesting things, including some big companies that are working on some startups. But I think that the technology is there to know that you come in the store. If you self-identify, if you have an app, they can take everything you did in the store, combine it with everything you did online, and they can combine it with what the weather is outside, what's happening, and try to make really good recommendation to you. I don't think any retailer does that well today. And I think a lot of them are like a bit very cautious about how to do it, because there's also a lot of potential backlash. Like, I don't know, there's don't want that. So I think my guess is we're about 18 to 24 months away from people figuring out the experience that's really useful and that becoming something that happens on scale, where you come in and you can get recognized and you can get active recommendations. And sometimes it'll be through an app, sometimes it'll be with a sales associate with a tablet that gets information about you that can approach and help you. I think there'll be different use cases implemented. We are probably involved in maybe, 20, 30 pilots that are trying things on a very small scale like that.
So when you started scale, tell us about your mistakes or
Yeah.
some stuff that you would recommend.
Yeah, it was, the scaling has been very, 20 people doing the work of 50 people easily. Everybody was working really hard, everybody was getting a lot done, and then we got to 100 people, and I felt like we were 100 people doing the work of 50 people. And we have 5 times the payroll and the same output. And it's like a lot of companies, I think, will tell you the same thing, but it really felt that way because we hired all these people really quickly. And then half of them, like through no fault of their own, had no idea what they were doing, nobody was helping them, so it took us a while to get to kind of 100 people at full productivity. Then we went pretty quickly to 150, and most people in the company don't feel like we have 160 people performing it at their absolute best in terms of productivity, so you want to get to that before you scale more. That part is really hard, especially when you're, like our revenue growth we've been growing over 100%, sometimes 200-300% almost every year for a while. The exceptions to those were kind of our act together to be able to grow. And things like companies, especially enterprise-focused companies, so our customers are enterprises, we're not a consumer company. I think to be able to grow fast, you have to become a complete machine at kind of hiring and training and when necessarily firing people around certain functions like sales, inside sales, sales engineers, support people. Like those functions, you have to be an absolute machine at kind of bringing them on and making them productive. Otherwise, like either one of those, you're not doing well, you come to a halt. And that's very hard, like you need to.
First-time entrepreneurs say it's really hard to fire the first time.
Yeah, it's, what it is, it's not like, it's not even that the firing itself is hard. It's like what happens is most people are not completely useless. If somebody's completely useless, it's okay. And even at Cisco, we have to fire people. But what happens in the startup, I think, is you always do it and then you keep delaying and every time you regret that. So like we've done it quite a few times. We got much better. One of the things that, I was at a dinner event with, they got almost every person they fired within the first 2 weeks of starting. Which to me, I had no idea how you can fire somebody within the first 2 weeks. So this was a couple of months ago, but I'd love to know somebody within 2 weeks. So what they did was, I thought at least was very interesting, where they say so if a new engineer starts, instead of going through full training, onboarding, all those type of things, they give them a task on their first day that they know a really good engineer will complete in a week. And if they're not done in 2 weeks, they're gone. And for almost every function, you can actually figure out something like that, whether it's 2 or 3 weeks, where you can see if somebody can work productively within the organization. And I actually thought it was a pretty fascinating thing, and we are trying to, not exactly like that, but implement something very similar, because I think that's, yeah, I mean, one of the, if I look at the biggest mistakes we made, yeah, these are on.
He didn't fire people earlier.
And most people we did end up getting rid of after 6 months, a year and a half. When I think about, like, if you give them a 2-week test like that, my guess is that probably we would have been able to figure it out very quickly. So, I mean, it's, I mean, I didn't come up with it, but it's something, but I think it's a pretty interesting way to look at it. So, yeah.
Questions? Yeah? Next, unit. Okay, go on.
Sorry, my English is no good, but one question. There were one people you get the money from friends, not like from the best form. Well, the first money is like the raising monies, because I'm also have two startup, and my friends help me do something. The question is, because I meet up and never seen this, I'm my first time here, and I would like to know how raise the money now, you know, it's not like that, because many people have
Yeah, it
money.
takes a lot of networking, and maybe we can talk about it after the event. I don't know if you want
At
to.
the beginning, and I actually almost discouraged them. They did put in, so we didn't do it from. We did, like I said, it was people that either knew the team very well, or like our biggest private investor, like knew people that knew us really, really well, and they made them money. So it was from that. So yeah, and I mean, if I didn't work at Cisco for a while and kind of meet those people, there's no way we would have been able to raise the first couple million. I mean, that for sure. Like no way in hell. I mean, we wouldn't, especially for us first-time entrepreneurs working with.
In US, it might probably take 18 months to 24 months till this technology takes off for big retailers. Do you see something different for global market? Maybe people in Germany or other countries,
You talking about the personalization piece of it?
like using this technology, like you said, to the full capacity
Yeah.
in retail stores?
I mean, people using technology today from an analytics perspective and making decisions, and we have, 160 really big brands that are using it on a big scale, and like I said, we've been doing that for now almost, 7 years. Personalization part of it, so being able to, like, like that kind of engaging people on a personal level in the store, like the same way you do online, I think it will take 18 to 24 months in the US. I think Europe, some European countries would be longer because privacy laws are actually much stricter. So if you look at, one of the challenges for us going global has been that what we do, touches data, and is much, much tougher. I mean, we're just starting to do some business in China, and they couldn't care less about like any privacy laws, so like you can track anything. So maybe it'll happen faster. I'm not sure. Like some actually Western brands, and even some like Japanese companies that we're working with, they want to do their pilots and experiment things in like Indonesia and China in their stores. So maybe over there it will happen faster.
I guess the question also was how the reception is. It so basically the stores, not in the United States, but
Yeah.
in other countries, were they more receptive to the business?
And our plan was to focus only on the US for a while because it's very hard to sell internationally. I mean, it has all kinds of challenges. We became global much faster because we have lots of our customers have stores internationally. So like I said, American Apparel was our first customer. They had stores in 20 countries and they wanted to deploy in all these 20 countries. And they wanted us to localize the UI to Japanese, Chinese, Korean. They wanted us to be able to do currency conversions, and they wanted us to be able to support them in those countries. So all of a sudden, and it was faster, but I think also the product was much more mature, the company was much more mature. And we opened an office in Singapore about a year ago, and we started selling there. So it's, for us, like I said, we went through, I think there's definitely, company, all of our IP is in software, but for people to use our product, it requires them to deploy hardware, which scared away a ton of venture capitalists and a ton of investors, by the way, so that was something people had to get very comfortable in that. But also deploying hardware makes the global business part very, very complicated. I mean, we had to deal with things of like cameras being stuck in customs and other stuff, and finding installs in different languages, so it was hard for us. So,
Question about hardware, just don't need to answer if it's company secret. Manufacturing, local or elsewhere?
Yeah, so we don't have any of our, none of our hardware, we have no base, some are Europe, some are Asia based, but none of that is proprietary built for us. That may change sometime in the future, but right now all of our intellectual property is in software. It's all off-the-shelf stuff that we end up reselling and deploying. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Did you talk their minds that allows you to be who you are, or is it more reliant on technology?
Yeah, so the idea is to be reliant on technology for the product and internally. I actually think we haven't done a great job of that, so if you look at it, we definitely underinvested in systems and tried to go and get stuff out of people's heads and things like that, which, like, those are some of the things that probably hurt us the most in terms of ability to grow. We are now trying to invest a lot more in automating things and making things like people more sufficient. In terms of how we sell to the retailers, the idea is to build as much of it as possible into the software. We do have a small consulting team, but that's, less than.
Tell us about your first sale.
How big is the sales department, and please tell about the first sale.
So today our sales department is about 35 people, but that includes sales company was selling. So we went, and like I said, it was it was very involved. Like every first sale, like we did a few pilots right away. Like American Apparel was one of them. Almost the whole company flew down there. We did a pilot store in Santa Monica. We spent all this time. One of the things I would say about scaling sales, that's another mistake. None of us came from sales background. People came from product engineering backgrounds. Nobody in the board was from sales background. And one of the mistakes we made, which I think is pretty common, it was two mistakes we made that were very common around sales. One is we got pretty excited about channel early on. We'll sell your product for you. And then we had 30, 40, 50, 60 salespeople each. It sounded like a great idea. We spent a ton of time with those guys, training them, dealing with them, negotiating contracts, and they sold absolutely nothing. And I think that's a very common experience with a lot of enterprise software companies in the early days. The product wasn't ready to scale. Today, like in the last year or so, we actually felt like the market was much more mature, the product was much more mature. We had some training and marketing where we started signing up some resellers, including some really big ones like AT&T, Tyco, and it's actually, channel is very productive. But it really hurt us initially, and that's another thing with venture guys. But the plan we had when we raised our first venture round, we missed that plan by a lot. So, and they were expecting that. They told us later they didn't expect us to come close to it. And the reason for that was our first year of sales, we generated, I think, a couple $1 million in the first full year of sales. And it was, me and our co-founders going to almost every sales call. We spent a lot of time, and we may be dealing with 5 customers at any given time. And then we entered the next year, and we had, 40 retailers. We didn't do kind of bottom up of, for every, $2 million in sales or $1 million in sales, you need a productive sales guy. For every productive sales guy, you need a sales engineer, you need these tools and other things. And we didn't build that plan, and we completely fell apart because we hired and trained kind of salespeople, put a sales engineering team in place. And then we, so that year was probably the lowest growth we've ever seen. And after that, we were able to grow pretty quickly. And again, but continuously investing in that, like figuring out like if, this year we're going to do, let's say if this year you're doing 50, this many sales guys that are productive, will take 3 months for them to productive. We need sales engineers. Doing that kind of planning and investing in that, it's hard because it's like you have to think much further than I normally think on a day-to-day basis. And that's been probably one of the biggest mistakes we made in terms of sales. So, yeah.
I have 2 questions actually regarding the investment piece. So one is that what is your experience in terms of raising from angels versus VCs versus corporate giants? And basically the second one is, what is the role of VCs that you got in your growth? Good VC versus bad VC that actually can force you to bankrupt?
So raising money from angels and institutional investors was very different for us. From angels it was like, so one is, and by the way, our biggest private investor housed 3 times to keep it going. And and now he's invested $5 million of his own money. Never worked with venture capitalists before. But doesn't know much about technology, but been unbelievably helpful. And actually having him on the board along with venture guys and people from American Express and Qualcomm, Nielsen has been really good because it provides a different kind of balance. It was, also when we raised our initial round, a few $1 million, it was raised, if we then build a company up and we sold it for $100 million, these guys would have been very happy. The second we raised our first venture round was about an $8 million round on a $27 million pre-money valuation at that time. And the second we raised that round, $1 million in profit, that's a waste of time for a $650 million fund. So that did change the dynamic of how we're looking to build a company, where now they're looking to see that you can build a company. At least you have an opportunity to build a $1 billion plus valuation, because if we, so now, and then every round it became more so. We were pretty fortunate where we, for them to be happy, you have to sell really, really high. The strategic, so we have, like I said, besides August, we have a couple of venture firms from New York. We went to the East Coast because we feel they know retail much better. And actually, I think there is a real difference between East Coast VCs and a really good private investor who's been very helpful. We have a really good Silicon Valley investor. We have a couple of East Coast investors. And then we also have Qualcomm Ventures, American Express, Tyco, Nokia, and then Nielsen. It's different where it was driven, I mean, the investments were the result of partnerships we did with them. So we did a partnership with American Express, and because of that, they wanted to invest. We signed a global reseller agreement with Tyco. Because of that, they want to invest. And they did not, those guys didn't lead the round, so they followed on, so it was, you know, it wasn't really valuation sensitive at all, so, but, yeah.
Question about the board, how much effect does the board have on your decisions?
I mean, it has a lot, and I think, you know, I've stuff, and from what I understand, we're actually very, very fortunate with our board and our board dynamics. And it did start with the August and their investment, and I think the partner's been great. That was complete luck at that time. We did not, it's not like we selected somebody based on how they're gonna be on the board. Since then, that's been a huge part of our decision process. $1 million that people wanted to put in, we got 4 term sheets without even doing a roadshow, and literally one of the biggest decision points for us was how it's gonna impact the board dynamics. So I think it's super important. To me, it's one of the most important things.
So, why do you need 60 million?
Well, I mean, of our life, which to me still feels like a lot, but apparently these days that's not very much for most Silicon Valley companies. And it does, again, we don't need 60 million or anything close to it if we, for us to survive.
So why do you need it for?
If we want to build, like I said, I think we believe in now, everybody involved in the company believe you can build a really big business. So when people ask us about exit, like we're not terribly concerned about exit of individual deals. We can build an independent public company. And if we want to build a big company, it does. In enterprise sales, where the sales cycles are reasonably long, you have to invest a lot. If you want to grow a lot, you have to invest a lot in growth. It does take a lot of capital. Growth, 4 years ago, I felt we had no direct competitors. We were the only company with this kind of mission statement of bringing e-commerce to analytics to physical retail. A few weeks ago, I went and counted 64 companies with the exact same mission statement. So there's a ton of new startups that popped up. I mean, there are not going to be 64 companies 2 years from now, I'm sure, but there are some like really smart people doing things. A bunch of them are raising really good money from top tier VCs. Another role, like the acquisition we did was actually, acquisitions are very hard. Overlap, and like their executives, our executives actually, like, you know, their CEO. So now I think the board and the management team is probably more, I mean, we're not actively going, but we're a lot more open to doing additional acquisitions, so that could be another use of capital.
So I actually have 2 questions. In your early days when you approach your VCs, how do you approach?
It was all through, pretty much all through introductions, and you know, in the early days, through people that knew us, and a few of them we stayed in pretty close touch. August though, like who ended up, we actually had some that we knew pretty well. I mean, at Cisco, I was part of the team where we did a bunch of acquisitions, and we also did some partnerships and OEM products with startups, and we got to know the board and the investors, but none of those we ended up raising money from. So like a venture guest lecturer at Haas Business School, and one of my co-founders did a Haas MBA part while he was at Cisco, and he was like, he really liked his presentation, so he emailed them and said, hey, we're now raising funding, and so that actually is pretty close to a cold call, you know, so. Yeah, not quite, but.
My second question is actually, after all these funds you've been raising, how much percentage the founders still own, how much percent the employee own? If you don't want to talk, that's fine.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm going to talk about specifics, but I mean, money is not free, so it's, I think, like I said, we've been, you know, like this time we raised more money than we planned to, but the valuations are much better, so money does get cheaper and cheaper. I would say, like if you look for amount of money we raised, the percentage that the common shareholders, I mean, it's not bad, but maybe less than some, but it's more because we're pretty generous with like early employees, and frankly, a lot of people, we gave them a choice of, hey, take less salary and more options for it, and we still do it sometimes for people. We say, hey, you can make, now for a long time, we also paid well below market, like, and then, you know.
Do you have any distinction between analytics and software in your organizational structure?
Well, outside of engineering, and what they do is, I mean, sometimes they do some custom analysis for customers, but most of what they do is part of product development where, so for example, when we got data from someone like American Express, which is a new data set that we got in, they would take that data and take that data from our, you know, from our system, put it in a spreadsheet or some existing customer, get all the other data, and they would literally work on understanding how can you bring those data together in a way that's like meaningful to retailers. And they would go and present it to customer. And we would do all that before we commit software developers to go and build that into the product. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's like that. And that team is very strong kind of data science people that are there to kind of understand, I mean, can understand statistics, can understand modeling, and they can go and actually build these data models outside of the software. But the goal is that once we figure out what's useful, it's important for us.
Can you elaborate maybe a little bit on pricing and licensing model?
Yeah, so, and then by the way, it did evolve too, which has been a challenge around when you're talking to investors and those things. But right now, we talk about ourselves as kind of a mixed SaaS model, where I say mixed SaaS is we charge upfront to get a store up and running. So if we get an order to install 500 stores, for all the value of the product, all the software is sold on a per store annual recurring basis, and now we make 95% plus really good SaaS margin. So the stuff we install, we refer to as SaaS, got much better, and that made a huge difference in our ability to raise funding. So, but that's the model.
More questions?
You collect so much data, like from similar stores, right? Do you give them like benchmarks, like on anonymous basis, for what they should be aiming, like for traffic, for conversion, lead?
We would never be able to sell to retailers if we owned the data. Having said that, most of our contracts, our standard contracts, give us right to aggregate and syndicate that data within a certain like minimum aggregation rules, and few people opted out, but in the specialty retail sector in US. But we use it as a thought leadership, lead generation, PR tool. So for example, like there's some publications that publish every month, here's what happened in retail, and they use source our data. When back to school, Halloween, Black Friday, usually we get people on, we get our data cited in Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. We have people on CNBC on the news talking about what's happening in retail. It's been a great PR tool. And the index is free, but you go and put in your email.
Own the data. Like, have you thought about it?
Yeah, well.
Changing the pricing if you own the data.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we haven't given it a ton of thought. We've thought about creating data products that we can sell. So today we sell a system to a retailer for them to run their stores. We've definitely thought about creating data products. And we get a ton of calls from, I mean, it's just, we have customers, a lot of them are public companies, and all of a sudden we're selling their data to, like hedge funds. We think we can build a huge business doing what we're doing. I think there are some interesting potential business models, and we have thought about it, but, I think the way we sell to retailers right now, no, I don't think we would change our pricing to the retailer. I mean, there's other products we can create probably, yeah.
Go ahead.
What's your profit margin on sales?
Our profit, like our gross margin, or what's?
Profit margin on sales.
Like, what do you mean by, I mean, what, do you mean like our operating profit or gross profit, or what's that on?
Give me a gross profit.
I mean, our gross profit so like I said, on the installation, it's about 35%. On the recurring, it's about 95%. So when we install a store that high, it's, 50, usually about, 50 to 60%. Over 3 years of a customer, our margin is usually north of 80% or 70-something, 80% for that customer. Over 3 years, though, because once we recognize the recurring revenue.
Around that we see, versus just waiting and investing from your money.
Yeah, well, we're not a profitable company. We could be, we have been on, like we'll, actually for a while every year we'll grow and then we'll have a few months of profitability, but that's because we're not a profitable company. So when you're not a profitable company, I mean, you don't want to be raising money when you are close to running out of money. So that's a good, way to decide it. The last round was, we weren't planning on raising it, but like I said, we did an acquisition. It was an all-stock acquisition. We said we'll go raise a little bit more. We ended up raising a lot more because of, in this case, mostly because of interest, and we could. Generally, I mean, everybody says that, and it's like sort of a cliche, but I mean, there are very few people that regret not raising more money than they could, and there's certainly people that regret not raising enough. So, I mean, everybody's always giving me advice of raising as much money as we can when we go on a raise, and I think it's probably good advice most of the time. But yeah.
Last question.
Did you have any advisor, like, how did you decide?
Yeah, well, it's not that it was a guess. It had no base, like there's nothing, like no basis in the fundamentals of the business. It was more for a seed round. Typically people get that percentage for investment, so that's how we did that. But Yeah, the next round was, I would say that was probably the one was based on, again, it's still it was still very much still a negotiation around the business, and frankly, what was it driven by is for a venture investor, good venture investor, to invest in really first venture round, which was kind of early Series B, they wanted, if they were the only venture investing, they need 20%. So honestly, I actually think we could have, we shouldn't say that we could have gotten a higher valuation than we did, because we didn't think that way. Because we knew our existing investors wanted to put another $1.5 million. So we were raising $8 million, we were raising $6.5 million. I think within reason, that $6.5 million need to buy about 20% of the business. I frankly wish we went and said, hey, we're gonna raise $10 million. I think we could have raised $10 million at the exact same dilution, because it wasn't so much a valuation, but what percentage the investor gets with it for that round. And I think for any round, you can look at what percentage that way.
So in 1-2 sentences, what would you advise young entrepreneurs?
1 or 2 sentences. Well, I think the biggest thing is just to do something. Honestly, we were unbelievably unprepared to do what we were doing. We knew nothing about retail. We started doing that, so I would say that's
That's a great ending. Well, thank you so much. If you have any more questions, Alexei, maybe we'll stay a little bit longer, right? And please enjoy, if pizza is still left, enjoy pizza and wine, and let's talk more.
That 3D company that I had, I sold it, now I'm running it, so I was just wondering if you're still interested in that 4K displays. When I come back in, and Phil, with the Nova Sensors, kind of dropped out of the space, he went back to retired. So we're not in the data analytics anymore, which I'm thankful, because I was running into the same problem, like being accused of, that was really